conversation than all of us, because we all bank and we all have an opinion about the banks, and we have all been affected by the banks. If you're wealthy and you're well off and you have good credit, the banks have been fantastic to you. If you're not in those positions, or you're jobless, or you're in an underwater home, you may want to hate the banks. But how do you fix the banking system going forward? The problem here is that for at least the last 15 years, the concept of regulating financial institutions has been to put people in charge of them who will do their best largely to not stand in the way of these companies becoming strong and profitable and big. Adam, you wrote in the New York Times Magazine last weekend, one lesson of this crisis, these are your words, one lesson of this crisis is that regulation, no matter how well intended, cannot be trusted to rein in Wall Street. So Christian is saying we need more regulation. You're saying it's not going to work.
Well, I think there are regulations that can work. I just think that people emphasize the idea that, oh, we just need more regulation. History is pretty clear on this. There's been major financial crises every few decades, 1907, obviously the 1930s, again after the 1980s. And what happens is everyone gets very, the general public becomes very excited and very upset and very interested, and Congress responds, sometimes wisely, sometimes not so wisely, and creates a set of regulations. And then things calm down, things get better. General public just goes about their business, but the banks are concentrated on one thing, which is profits. And so there's this concept of regulatory capture, which basically means that the banks are going to wait us out, they're going to spend us out, meaning the citizens, and they are going to slowly co-opt the process. And that's not to say we don't need regulation. It's not to say it should be a wide open free market.
You're just saying it hasn't been effective.
It's very hard to structure.
I just tarred all regulators with one brush a moment ago, and I want to just backtrack on that a little bit, Tamara, because Sheila Bair, who was in charge of shoring up our nation's banks during the financial crisis as the head of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, I think was a good regulator. I think her operation ran very well. She wrote this week that if banks are too big to fail, the banks that are too big to fail are broken up. Customers would benefit, the government would benefit, the banks themselves would benefit. Do you think this is a part of the solution, that our banks are not just too big to fail, they're just too big?
Absolutely. I think she's exactly right, and she has been a really effective regulator. I mean, listen, Adam's right that the financial system will find a way around regulation. At the same time, one of the major things that helped this crisis spin out of control was deregulation over the last 15, 20 years of the banking system, and particularly on some key fundamental principles that I think we have to reenact. And that is, again, breaking up the banks and separating systems of consumer commercial banking, investment, and insurance. Bringing back, what we all say is Glass-Steagall.
Why is that important? So that when I go to a bank and deposit my money, it's not being used in some crazy, risky venture that I wouldn't understand if I studied it for a month?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And so that we have these companies that are more manageable, more efficient, and more accountable to the regulators, and that people can actually get their heads around. I mean, during the buildup of the housing bubble and all of the toxic assets and the bets upon bets upon bets, you had CEOs of these banks who had no idea what
Right, AIG was a perfect example. They had the thing that broke us all down. Most people in AIG, even at the highest levels, couldn't explain to you what it was. Christian, if we're all on the same side of this thing, and I think most people are, that there's a problem. The banking system doesn't need to go away. It needs to be fixed. Why can't it get fixed? Why can't we properly regulate banks, as Adam points out? Is it the lobby? Is it that Wall Street is too entrenched in Washington, or vice versa? What's the problem?
Well, I think Adam did point very effectively to the fact that, it's the case with all special interest lobbying. The banks care about this a lot more than everybody else does, and so they are really, focusing on it with laser precision. Right. It's also a really complicated issue. But I do want to push back against an idea that Adam was advancing, although, Adam, I'm a huge fan of yours. I think you're brilliant. But there is a little bit of a fatalism in what you were saying about this notion that, crises are inevitable, we can't rely on regulation to save us. Of course that's true, but I'm hearing that a lot from Wall Street right now, and I don't think that's an accident. I think that that is a line that Wall Street is peddling right now to make us throw up our hands and say no regulatory framework is perfect, so don't worry about it. And I think that that is a crucial mistake. And I would draw a parallel with driving and cars. Car accidents are indeed inevitable, and people are going to die in car accidents, and that is a tragedy. It doesn't mean that we give up. We still have seat belts, we have airbags, we have speeding limits. And we have to have the same attitude towards the banks. Yes, accept that regulation isn't perfect, and it's really dangerous to think that it can be, but also try to make it better.
Keep on trying until we succeed at that. All right, good to talk to you all. What a great conversation. I guess we're keeping the banks. Adam, good to see you. Thanks very much for a great article.
They're going to be relieved to hear that, Ali.
If you haven't read Adam's article, go look it up. Adam Davidson is co-host of Planet Money. Christy, of course, writes on this stuff all the time. Christy Freeland from Thomson Reuters Digital, and Tamara Draut, Vice President of Policy and Programs at Demos. Krista's got to go, but it's too bad because when we come back, I'm going to be talking